There's a fine line between holding people accountable and being liked. When you're put in a position of leadership, your goal and your objective is not to be liked. Your goal and objective is to lead. That's it. Be the most interested person in the room, not the most interesting person in the room. And when you show that you're interested in people, they will respond and realize that you actually care.
Meet Leo. He's sitting in a conference room with other regional leaders discussing the new rollout. This strategy was intended to improve customer handoffs, reduce escalations, and create a tighter follow-through across locations. And as the conversations are going, they end up circling around Leo's team. They're not following through. They're behind. They've missed deadlines. They haven't adopted the new process. And the part that stings the most is that they're talking about Leo, but not to Leo directly. I'm not sure his team really believes he's going to enforce it. We've heard this all before, and at some point, someone needs to hold the line. Leo responds calmly. He explains the conversations he's had, the expectations he's set, and the steps he intends to take. But even as he explains it, he feels it. They're not buying it. Leo is very well liked, but somewhere along the way, his likability has created a perception of being soft. Now, he doesn't want to be the type of leader that leads with fear and is harsh to his team. And he does want to have some accountability. He wants his team to follow through. He wants other leaders to trust him. And right now, he doesn't know how to do that. Today, I'm speaking with Jason O. Harris, retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, combat pilot, keynote speaker, and founder of the No Fail Trust framework. Jason led in environments where trust, accountability, and execution were not optional. And now he helps organizations build high-performing teams that actually follow through. And I'm excited to hear how Jason would help someone like Leo build real accountability without losing his humanity. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Jason, I was reading a lot about you and your journey into military service, and thank you for your service. I was curious as to what brought you into military service. What was the fuel behind that, or the story behind that?
So the biggest piece is that I'm fourth generation military. My mother served in the military. My father served in the military. My grandfather served in the military, and then his father served in the military. So it was kind of a natural progression, so to speak. But really what it comes down to was I needed a way to pay for college. And when it was time to go to college, I was going to be the first one in my family to attend college. And I didn't know how I would pay for it. And so I decided that I would apply to all of the military service academies, realizing that if I was accepted, then when I graduated, I would actually have a job and I would get a commission in the United States military. So that was a big piece of my decision matrix to join the military at an early age.
Wow. And okay, that's interesting, because then it suggests that there were things you experienced that you may not have expected. What was, I guess, one of the big surprises, something that you experienced that was maybe unexpected, and now you look back and say, well, I'm really glad I experienced that because it taught me something and I never thought I would learn it through this experience?
as far as going to the military or the Air Force Academy, or which part are you actually asked? Because there's like, that's like a whole wide question, man. I mean, like, I would love to answer, but I feel like that question is so wide. So is there a particular area or angle that you're kind of like looking at with regards to the
Early
lessons
on.
learned or things that happen?
Early on, when you first joined, and one of the first lessons that you learned, we could start there.
Wow, there's so many lessons that I learned, but really for me, when I joined the military, when I went to the Air Force Academy, you go through basic training. I was one of those guys who went through the prep school first, and then I went to the 4 years of the academy. So 5 years at the Air Force Academy, one of those years being at the Air Force Academy's prep school. My family has a military background. I've been without access to military facilities and without a military ID card for 1 year my entire life. So this is kind of all I've ever known is military, being military adjacent in some form or fashion. And so I came in with a level of understanding. I also did junior ROTC in high school. I was one of those hardcore kids. I was on the honor guard. I knew how to shine my boots. I knew how to shine my shoes. I knew how to have a solid uniform. So some of those things were very foundational for me at an early age. And then when I got to the Air Force Academy, it was understanding how that environment worked, understanding how to play by those rules. And then beyond playing by those rules, it was understanding, how do I actually integrate with a group of people and how do I get to know them and to realize that we very well might be with each other for the next 5 years. And so those were some lessons that were really probably critical and pivotal to who I became. And it was these lessons of, how do I not just integrate with the organization, integrate with the individuals, but how do I create friends and how do I cross boundaries of people that I've never grown up with, people that are from all walks of life? Because the beauty of a military service academy is our population is built by various sectors across the country. So each congressional district and each senator for each state gets so many people that they can select to then be able to go to the Air Force Academy. Now, of course, you have an overwhelming population of cadets that are from California, from Texas, and New York, because those are some of our biggest states. But then you have people from all around. And so my roommates, my freshman year, one of them was a military brat. The other one was from North Dakota. I've never even been in North Dakota. I have no idea what it's like in North Dakota, right? And so you got to learn how to get along with people. And then you got to figure out, how do I engage people? How do I connect with people? And how do I create these friendships and these bonds? And I would say those were critical initial lessons when I went to the Air Force Academy.
Yeah. And it, I think, is something that I see in the work that you do now. I'm sure it's fueled by those connections and relationships. It's all about trust for you. You talk so much about trust. And so is there a story that you could tell of where you had to build that kind of trust, even with people that you don't have similar backgrounds with, and some lessons that you can pull from that? Is there a story that comes to mind?
There are tons of stories that come to mind, but when it's the initial story that really jumps out at me is one that I rarely tell. And it was with my freshman roommates. I had 2 roommates my freshman year, Brad and JD. And we were restricted to the Air Force Academy campus. So you can go anywhere on the campus, but you just can't leave the campus. It was sometime during the winter and they were like, hey man, we should go hiking. And I'm like, hiking? I don't do hiking. I grew up in Oakland, California. Like, that's not my thing. And they were like, no, let's go. We're going to climb this mountain. I was like, whoa, time out. Okay, hiking and climbing a mountain, definitely not my kind of thing. I'm a city guy. So they convinced me to climb this mountain. And it was one of the coolest experiences that I ever had during my time there. And it gave us a chance to connect. You know, when you're out in nature, you're disconnected from everything else, and you're actually just able to speak to one another. You can speak very candidly and you can connect, and you get to know each other in a whole different way. And there's this level of comfort that happens where you're like, well, I've always had this question that I want to ask somebody like you, or somebody that's from where you're from, or whatever. And that was a very eye-opening experience for me to realize we have so much in common, to realize we're even more connected now that we've had this experience. And so I encourage people when they're trying to connect, figure out how do you get to know that person for real, not just very surface level, but to go deeper. But for me, that hiking, climbing a mountain experience, it was life changing. I'd never done anything like that in my life. And now I'm standing at the top of this mountain, the highest mountain on the Air Force Academy installation, and I'm able to see the entire front range of Colorado. Little snowdrops and balls comes down, looking like dipping dot snow while we're sitting on the mountain. And then we figure out how not to kill ourselves going down. But again, it was one of the coolest experiences. And it's something that I would have never, ever tried on my own had my roommates not said, hey, man, let's go for a hike. Let's go climb this mountain.
Yeah. And it's a shared experience. It's a shared experience, that you had where it really creates that bond just through the experience itself.
Yeah, it's a shared experience. It creates the bond, and it allowed us to build a level of trust with each other. We knew that we had each other's backs. We knew that we came from completely different worlds. One of the guys, his dad was a colonel and a pilot. No one in my family had ever been an officer. No one in my family had a college degree. Here it was, he knew where he was going to go to college because his dad was an Air Force Academy graduate. So we existed in two totally different worlds. My other roommate, his family, he grew up with both parents, and he grew up in a place that I had never heard of, never been. But it didn't matter that we came from three different worlds. We knew in that moment, over the course of that experience, that we had built a level of trust with each other, that we had built a connection with each other because of that shared experience.
Yeah. And we have so much of the opposite happening in our workforces, unfortunately. I've been sharing the stat I heard from Gallup. In January, they announced that 69% of U.S. employees are not actively engaged at work. And I'm curious, Jason, to get your take with all the experience you have, and from your military service to the speaking that you do and the companies you work with. What do you think is the real reason behind why there's such disengagement in the workforce?
There's a lot of disengagement because we aren't creating the environment and we aren't creating the culture that promotes engagement. A lot of us, we're allowing all of the external influences that are happening right now in our environments to contribute to how we show up at work. And that is what is contributing to this high level of disengagement at work. And then I think the other piece is leaders will determine what the culture is. Leaders will help us to determine how we engage and or disengage at work. And when I hear that stat, it's appalling, number one. But the second thing that I think about, Jay, when you hear that stat is it disengagement with the work and or disengagement with each other? Because those are two different things. But if it's just disengagement with the work, then there's one angle that I would attack that from. But if it's disengagement from each other, then I would attack it in a completely different way, depending on the environment that we're talking about. And so there's definitely outside influences that are contributing to us being disengaged. But I would also say that a big piece of creating the right environment, creating the right culture, that rests on the shoulders of the leaders within the organization.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good angle to take this, which is, is it disengagement with the work itself, meaning people are just not in the right work, or there's just something missing in what they're doing, or is it disengagement with people? And I like that you put the focus on leaders. You have so much experience as a leader. And I know that from what I've heard others share, that the military offers the best leadership training through the experience that you have. So what are some of the things that are something you could say, the military service taught me this on leadership, that is a gap that you see in leadership within corporate environments? Like, where is a missing piece that you would take from military service and bring into a professional work environment?
I think one of the biggest pieces that I see a gap between the military and non-military environments is the structure that we have. There's a lot of people that they say, hey, I want to go to the military because of the structure. And then the other side is not just the structure, but the training that we do. So it's how we do training. To think, You can take a young person fresh out of high school and you can actually have them controlling, driving tanks and shooting weapons. You can have them controlling over 80% of an aircraft and have a level of responsibility. You could have them being a crew chief for an aircraft that's dropping bombs, and their name is on the side of the aircraft because we've presented them with the ownership level of like what it means to own everything about that aircraft, getting it ready to fly, getting the weapons ready and secured. And we can only do that through the right kind of training, trusted training. And because we do that, we're able to take these young people and give them a level of responsibility that in most other environments, it takes 2, 3, 5, 10 years before someone is given that level of responsibility. But we do that fundamentally, foundationally, because of the training that we do and how we do our training, but also how we bring them in and onboard them. That's why we have basic training. And across all military services, that basic training, it allows us to understand what is the culture, what are the codes, what are the values, what's the mission, how do we communicate collectively? And that then determines how we can operate over the course of our careers. In most organizations, they don't do that. And I think that's, if you start there, that's one of the biggest gaps that shows where there's a significant difference in how we operate in the military versus in non-military environments.
Yeah. That onboarding piece is so important. I mean, I've been through it, Jason. I've experienced it where I've been onboarded into an organization or moved into a leadership position. And it was like, okay, this is your job now. You figure it out. Right? And it's so true. Why don't organizations do this? It's so obvious, right?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why. One, there's the people that say, well, it costs too much money.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to fight the argument that it costs money. But the question is are you going to say that it costs money, or would you rather say that it's an investment? Those are two different things. Are you speaking about how much it costs you, or are you speaking about the investment that you're making in your people? And then with that same concept, there are people who say, well, if I put the training into this person, what if they leave? Well, what if you don't put the training into that person and they stay? And so people start pushing back on real, true, deep, thorough onboarding because they're looking at a cost versus looking at an investment. In the military, we're looking at the investment in our people. We're looking at how do we get them ready to do the job, to get the mission done, no matter what that cost is. And again, I get it. I can't compare a military organization and the budget and how we manage our money or our funny money to a regular corporate environment. You can't. However, if we're talking about this gap and we're talking about onboarding, I do think that a lot of companies are missing a significant opportunity to bring people into their culture, to educate people on their culture, to educate them on how we communicate within our culture, and to educate them on how we get the job done and why we do what we do and why we are a superior organization and why we actually want you here as part of our organization and how we're actually going to be your champion. And we want you to win. We want you to succeed here.
Yeah. And I think the other part of ownership that you talked about is one that is really missing. And I think the common thing I see, Jason, I want to get your take on this, is so many leaders struggle with micromanaging and they want to control everything. And from what I'm hearing in you, the military experience you had is no, empower others to take full ownership. So talk to me a little bit about that tendency around people wanting to control everything and not empower their people versus how it looks on the other side from your experience with the military.
I have a sticky note on my computer and it says, trust but verify, not for micromanagement, but for assessment of how well I did my job. Trust but verify, not for the purposes of micromanaging, but for assessing how well I did my job. There are definitely a lot of people that micromanage folks. And there's one thing to train them. When I'm training someone, when I'm ensuring that I can validate that they understand the training, when I'm validating that they understand the processes, how to run the checklist, how to stick to the standard operating procedures, That's not micromanaging. That's training. Now, once I've validated that they can do the job, then I get to step back and empower them to execute the job. And if I now look over their shoulder, now I'm micromanaging. Those are different. Some people confuse them. I also think that there are a lot of people that have titles that are in charge of people, and they haven't created the right kind of training that's trusted. They haven't created the right kind of processes that are trusted. And if they do, they haven't validated that they work, and they haven't validated that their people actually understand how to do the job. And because they haven't validated those pieces, they don't have the capacity and the capability to trust the people to get the job done. So because they don't have that capacity and capability, they feel that they're forced to micromanage people. And then the other part of that is that there are people who they give someone the manual and they go, hey, here's the manual, here's your job, go do your job. And in doing that, they're setting their people up for failure. The person makes a mistake and now they feel like, well, I got to micromanage you. Well, of course. And actually, you don't have to micromanage that person. You just need to train that person. Because giving someone a manual, telling someone to watch a PowerPoint deck or like 10 hours of videos, that's not real training. They didn't learn much, that you didn't validate that they actually learned. Do you even know their learning style to then say that they're ready to go out there and do the job? And so now you do need to fix what's been messed up. And now it definitely will come off as being a micromanager. So there's all these various aspects of what's happening in the workplace. And yes, it does lead to mistrust, distrust, a lack of trust, and it leads to people micromanaging others.
Yeah. I once heard this analogy, Jason, and it always stayed with me. It was a mentor I worked with years ago, and I was trying to find that balance between, okay, I want to empower people, and there needs to be some accountability, that verification. And he said to me, he's like, Jay, do you have children? I said, yeah, I have a daughter. And at the time she was probably 6 or so. And he said, do you ask her to do her bed in the morning? And I say, yeah, of course I do. He goes, well, do you check that it's done? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I check that it's done. He's like, well, you need the verify piece, right? You have to verify. And at the same time, Jason, I wasn't, go do your bed and then I'm watching every step of her doing her bed and fixing every little corner, right? That's micromanaging. So, and if she's doing it wrong, then it's my job to train her to do it right.
Absolutely. With my daughter, we showed her how to make her bed. We walked her through her morning routine. My daughter's 10, she's in the 5th grade. And we went through the process of showing her everything that she needed to get done in the morning. And then my wife and I, we worked with her over the course of a few days to do some sample runs. Let's run through this and let's time it. Let's see how you do. Hey, are there some things that you should do differently? Hey, when you make up your bed, did you think about this? Or, hey, this is how you can do things a little bit quicker, more effectively, more efficiently. And then from there, we now trust her to get it done. But we made sure that she understood how to do it. See, a lot of times somebody says, go make up your bed, but they never show the child how to make up their bed. And then the kid goes and makes up the bed and they're like, well, you didn't make it up right. Well, did you show me how to make the bed up the right way? And if you didn't, I'm not going to make it the right way.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's easy for people to get caught into, well, I'm busy, I got too much going on. And that's, I have compassion for that, Jason. I do, because I do think there are some people who are under a lot of pressure and they're like, well, I just don't have the time to do all of that, to verify and to train. What would you say to somebody who says that? It's not even about investment of money for them. They're just saying, well, we just have to move faster. It's just, we don't have the time to do it. What would you say to somebody who has that challenge?
Slow is fast, fast is slow. Slow is fast, fast is slow. When it comes to learning how to shoot and shoot really well in a combat environment, most people think that we start training really fast. And most people think that then once we get good at shooting, that we shoot fast. No, we slow things down. We will do drills. When you work with Olympic level shooters on elite teams that actually are shooting rifles and pistols, you'll find that a lot of their drills are just nice and slow. They just go very slow to make sure that they can execute it perfectly. They go very slow. And so I say that because, yes, you might not have time right now because you have this schedule. You're busy and you have all these things to do. But if you never take time to slow down, to slow things down, to take a time out, and then create the time, build in the time to actually do that training, then you're never going to have time and you're never going to get better and your people will never be trained and you will always feel overwhelmed. You will always feel like there's never enough time and your people will always feel like they're not trained or not good enough. And perhaps they will feel like you can't trust them and they can't trust you. And they will likely leave for another organization who does have the time to train them and give them the proper support to actually do the job well, and they will feel safer because of that.
That's powerful stuff. Everyone listening, I really hope you take that with you. How important it is to slow down. It will yield better results in the end, and you're also going to get things off of your plate because your people are now trained and equipped to be able to handle the responsibilities, and you're not out always, people say, I have to put out fires. I spend all my time putting out fires. Well, why are there fires? There shouldn't be fires, right? So I'm curious too, because we have the story of Leo that we heard earlier. And in that story, I think Leo has this bit of a problem where he's a nice guy and he doesn't want to upset anyone. What are your thoughts on that? Someone who has that desire to lead is really smart and capable, and they find that people can at times walk all over them.
There's a fine line between holding people accountable and being liked. When you're put in a position of leadership, your goal and your objective is not to be liked. Your goal and objective is to lead. That's it. When you're leading and you're leading well, ideally, you will be liked. But again, the objective of a leader is not to be liked. The objective of a leader is to earn their title of leader every single day. And if you're earning your title of leader every single day, being liked is not part of that process. Leading is what you're doing, and holding people accountable, mentoring people, coaching people, that's what you're doing as a leader. And so sometimes, and again, the reality is that we all want to be loved. We all want to be liked. That's part of our human nature, and that's okay. But when you choose to step up and become a leader, whether you're tapped to be a leader or you volunteer to be a leader, and I do believe that everyone has the capability and capacity to lead no matter what their title is, but especially when you're in a titled position, you have to set aside the desire to be liked and to be loved and step into the role of leading people. And the reality is that there are going to be some people that no matter how likable you are, they're not going to like you because they don't like authority, and that's okay. You can still be a leader and you can still hold them accountable. And so when I look at Leo's story, I would look at Leo and begin to have the conversation with him about the difference in trying to be liked and loved and the difference in leading. And to lean on the side of leading, and leading at times, you're going to hurt someone's feelings, not with intentionality, not with disrespect or anything of that nature, not by belittling people, but you're going to hurt people's feelings because you're going to hold them accountable and you're going to hold the standard. That's what leaders do. And some people just don't like being held to a standard because they've never been held to a standard before. And once you hold certain people to a standard, guess what? They're not going to like you. And that is okay.
Yeah, that one hit me when you said there are just some people that no matter what, they don't like an authority person. They don't like someone who holds them to a standard. That really is a powerful insight because I've worked with people like that. And I felt, because I'm someone, Jason, I'm a recovering people pleaser. I say it all the time. I really struggle. I've struggled to let go of that. I've had to really work on it myself because I really want people to like me. And I realized, from what you said, there's probably nothing I could have done differently. I mean, it didn't matter what I did, they weren't going to like me.
Yeah. When you experience leadership in different capacities, let me actually change it. One of the things that one of my grandmothers said when I was growing up, she says, baby, she said, it's lonely at the top. And I never understood what she meant until I started getting into leadership positions. And she would tell me over and over, baby, it's lonely at the top, and you need to understand that. And what you realize is that as you progress in the leadership journey, there are some people who are just not going to want to go with you. There are some people who are not going to want to appreciate the fact that you're a leader. And I remember this one time when I was at the Air Force Academy. I had 3 best friends. And one of my best friends, he had got a significant leadership role. And I thought for sure I would go to him and say, hey, buddy, you got the job. You're going to hire me to be on your staff, right? He had a whole staff of people that he led and that led the whole cadet group and the cadet wing and whatnot. And I thought he would put me on his staff. And he says, Jason, I could not, in good faith and good conscience, as your friend, put you in this position because academically you would suffer because I'm going to hold you to a standard and there's going to be too much work for you to do. And you need to focus on your academics. Now, if I wasn't smart and I wasn't mature enough, I would have been upset at my friend for telling me no. I would have been upset at my friend for not hooking me up, for not giving me a job that was a leadership role above other people. But instead, I respected him for respecting me enough to not set me up for failure. And again, think about it. That same example, there are other people who would have been upset and would have said, then we must not be friends because you didn't help me out. No, he actually did me a favor by telling me no. And he understood what it meant to be a leader early. And I learned that lesson early, that sometimes as a leader, you have to tell those closest to you no. And you have to hold those closest to you and all around you, you have to hold them to a standard. If not, you'll get walked over. And if not, you won't be effective. You will not be an effective leader.
Yeah. And for our listeners, while leadership is impactful and it's fulfilling, it's not for everyone, and that's okay too. If it's so important to be liked and that approach doesn't feel aligned for you, there are other ways to have fulfilling, meaningful, impactful careers. I feel like so often, Jason, people think, oh, just getting to a leadership position, that's the next thing, and I want to climb the ladder, but they're not taking inventory the way you just shared. Like, this is what it would be like. Do you really want that? And if you don't, that's okay. But if you do, then here are the things that you have to be taking ownership of.
I agree with you 100%, Jay. And the other piece of that is that in some organizations, they are promoting people to leadership roles that actually do not want it. You look in certain organizations when they have sales, and the guy or gal who's the number one salesperson, they go, you're going to be the sales manager. And that person's like, no, all I want to do is to be the best salesperson that you have. I don't want to be a leader. I don't want to be your sales manager. I don't want to be your sales leader. I just want to keep being really good at sales. The other piece to consider, Jay, is this. In organizations, we train people how to do their jobs. We don't train people how to be leaders. And that is a gap, and that is a failure. And that is why there are a lot of subpar leaders. That is why there are a lot of people who are failing at leadership because they ended up there by accident and there was no intentionality in selecting them. And then once we selected them, we didn't have intentionality in how we trained them on how to lead.
Yeah, so true. And, I was thinking back, I had a experience once with, you said the salesperson, I thought of one of the top performers I've ever observed. This person was incredible. Every month, always had the best numbers. And there was a position open within our training group, and I was one of the leaders. Now, when you become a trainer or coach, you are leading in many ways. It's not maybe in the hierarchy, but you are leading other leaders. So you are responsible for supporting them. And I'll never forget the interview, Jason, because I had this person on a call, one interview, right? And everything this person was asking was about how much money they're going to make, how much they would get in commissions, what their free time would look like. And that conversation woke me up to, even though this person is an incredible performer, they should not even be considered for this role.
No, they're looking at the wrong metrics. They're looking at the wrong things. I'm reading a book right now about business leadership, and literally the author was talking about that exact thing. He says, when you're interviewing that person for a leadership role, even if it's not a leadership role, if their primary focus is how much money am I going to make, especially when it comes to a leadership role, then you need to run as fast as you can from that person, because they're in it for the money. They're not in it to actually lead. And there's nothing wrong with money. We need money to survive. We need money to take care of our families. I don't ever want to discount that. And I don't ever want to take that lightly, having come up, in a poor environment, However, when it comes to who you're selecting for leadership, if that's the questions that they're starting off with, then they're focused on the wrong things. So I agree with you 100%. That's the wrong thing to be focused on.
Yeah. And I think that that's something to take inventory of oneself as a leader, right? What do you really care about? And is it aligning with a leadership role? And what I'm curious too, to get your take on in this story with Leo is, let's say, all right, he goes, I want to be able to now go to my team and hold them more accountable to, let's say, following through on a new system that they said they would start doing and they haven't been doing. How would you recommend a leader approach their team with this type of ask, to where they are still considering the human element and having a bit of a stronger and more firm approach to following through on a new initiative?
Jay, I'll actually reference a story that's going to be in my new book that's coming out. And in this story, when I was a squadron commander, my last job in the Air Force, I was a squadron commander, and I had one of the captains. She came to me and she says, "Hey, sir," she says, "I want to give disciplinary paperwork to this staff sergeant." And I go, "Okay, great. Tell me a little bit about what's going on. By the way, Captain, I'm not big on paperwork, just so you know, but tell me what's going on." So she told me what's going on. And I says, "Okay, fantastic." I says, "Well, before we start down the pathway of paperwork, let me ask you a couple of questions, Captain, since you're her direct supervisor. Can you unequivocally tell me that you've given her the right training and validated that she understands her job? Can you then unequivocally tell me that you've provided her with the processes and the checklist for her to execute her job and validate it that she understands it? And if you cannot give me the answer of yes to both of those questions or all of those questions, then perhaps it's you who should get the paperwork and not her."
Ooh.
And so suffice to say, that young staff sergeant didn't get any paperwork because that captain didn't do her job to ensure that her direct report was properly trained. So when it comes to Leo and holding someone accountable, it's one thing to say, "I want to hold you accountable." It's another thing to say, "I want to hold you accountable, and I'm doing it knowing that I've set you up to either do your job or not." And so the first thing I would say to Leo is, if you're going to hold people accountable, I need you to ensure that everyone has the correct amount of training, the correct training, and that it's been validated. I need you to also ensure that you have the processes in place that they can follow systematically. And if you don't, then what are you going to do to ensure that, one, they're trained, two, they have the right process, that's standard operating procedures, that's checklists, not somebody just writing notes, but we all need to be operating off of the same checklist so that we can ensure that it's done the correct way. Once that's done and we've validated the training, it's at that point that now you can fully hold people accountable. And then in holding people accountable, I need you, Leo, to be able to step up and be willing to let someone know that they're not performing at the level of expectation. And the other piece of that is, as you do this, you're creating expectation management ahead of time before I need to hold you accountable. That's what you're doing with the training. That's what you're doing with the process. So you need to then be able to go to that person and say, "Hey, Jay, I don't think you're doing your job well enough. Here's how the process works." And ask the right questions of that person. And if they choose to intentionally not follow, or they just can't keep up, then you have to be willing to hold them accountable and exercise a level of discipline that's necessary so that you get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah.
See how that's a graduated way of how we're thinking about it. You can't just go, "Hey Jay, I'm holding you accountable to get the job done." You're gonna go,
Right.
"Well, Jason, I don't, Leo, I don't know what I'm doing." So all of those things have to happen in order for Leo to actually be successful and really holding people accountable.
I love it. It's starting with what is the standard that you are creating, the processes, the checklist before you even go to your team. And I think Leo's really missing that. I think you nailed it. I think that's what he's missing. And I think that oftentimes leaders are not even giving that a lot of thought. They're just, what happens is they get reprimanded, right? They get reprimanded. So their director says to them, your people, you got to start holding them accountable. And they go, oh, okay. They react emotionally. Then they go to their team and say, we got to do better at this. And the team's like, wait, what? We don't have a standard here. We don't have a process. And you're coming at me now saying I'm not doing my job, but you didn't really give me a clear process of how to do my job.
Right. And the other piece for Leo, he's torn between two environments. He's torn between the people that he's leading and the people that are coming down on him. And so Leo also has to have the capacity and the willingness and the capability to look at his leadership and say, hey, I'm willing to do this job and lead these people, but I need you to give me some time, because what I've learned after I've connected and talked with each of these folks or the critical people, that they're missing key pieces of information. And before I can actually hold them accountable and before I can actually discipline them in the accountability process, I need to make sure that I've trained them. So give me this amount of time, set what that timeline is going to be, put a metric to it, and then say, okay, give me that time, senior leadership, and then we'll come back and let's reevaluate what things look like from that time on. Sometimes we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to lead up and we're afraid to ask for permission to actually do the things that need to be done so that we can create that right environment.
Yeah. I think Leo, of course it's based on a real person. I think one of the things that he's struggling with is advocating for himself and speaking up in those rooms. People are coming at him and he's cowering a bit. And I agree with you that there is a need for him to step up, coach up, ask for that permission. And it got me curious as you were going through that and explaining. You've worked with so many leaders and you've seen some great leaders. You've seen some maybe not so great leaders. When you think about the way in which they communicate, how they communicate to either a leader above them, a partner, or even to their team, what are some of the qualities in how people communicate that make them a great leader?
Communication is essential in any environment. And I think one of the first pieces when it comes to communicating, the people that communicate very well is they do something that I talk about when I'm working with clients, and that is connection. And what I mean by that is they create these moments to connect with the other person. Because when you connect with that other person, you get to know who they are. If we had more time, Jay, I'd ask you a lot more questions about who you are, what your background is, what did you enjoy about working at Tesla? And I'd ask you these other questions about, hey, where'd you go to college at? And what that's going to do is that's going to create a level of connection between us. One of the things that I say is that connection leads to commitment, commitment leads to accountability, accountability leads to trust. And so if we start with connecting with people, then we build the commitment, then we build the accountability, then we build the trust. And so now it becomes exponentially easier for us to communicate with each other, even when we have those tough moments. When I was a squadron commander, I had my senior leader above me, my group commander, and there were moments where we'd have a conversation and I'd say, hey, boss, check this out. Can we just have an honest conversation? And go, yep, got it. And we'd have a gloves off, direct, honest conversation. And we might raise our voices a little bit at each other, but we understood that it was out of love and kindness. It wasn't meant that we were mad at each other, but we had created that connection. So we were able to communicate with each other in a very direct way. And a lot of times we miss that. And so I think the leaders that are very successful across environments, they don't just communicate well, they communicate based on the connection that they've created with people. And then
Yeah.
also in that, some of that is basic, that the moment they meet a person, they're building a connection. You've possibly seen that person when they show up, they're like, hey, Jay, how's it going, man? Where are you from? Hey, were you in a fraternity when you were in college? Hey, did you play any sports? And what they're doing is they're trying to find the commonality. And when we find that commonality, now we can communicate differently. Now we can be real with each other. Now we know who we're talking to. And it's not just talking at somebody, it's actually talking with someone.
Yeah. And I think that it's a path that is available to anyone. Like what I think sometimes people do is they overcomplicate things. And Jason, what you said is available to anybody in a leadership position. It's just showing genuine interest, genuine curiosity. And if that could come from a real place, then all those other things happen as a byproduct. The commitment, as you said, and the accountability, that connection is established. And now people look to you as someone that they respect. Maybe they like or don't like some things, but they definitely respect you now, and they're going to follow through. And I'm curious too, of course, as we get towards the end of our conversation, I always want to ask our guests, if you did meet Leo in this story, and Leo tells you what he's going through. Let's say you gave a talk at his company. He's, let's say, after you're off the stage, chatting with you on the side, tells you what he's going through, and you have an opportunity to ask him a question or two to get him to think about this a bit differently. What would you ask him, Jason, and why?
There's a ton of questions that I would love to ask Leo, but I would start with, have you had a chance to get to know each one of the people on your team, Leo? And then I'd ask him, not just knowing their name and the basics, but have you learned who they are? Have you learned their why for being there? Have you learned why they stay there? Have you learned what makes them tick? Because that is where you build that connection. That is where you build that commitment and that accountability and that trust. I would start with that with Leo, because if he hasn't done that, then I'm going to give him a homework assignment, depending on his answer. And I'm going to say, okay, Leo, your homework assignment is, when you start going in from now on, you don't have to do it in a day. You don't have to do it in a week. Rome wasn't built in a day, as we've heard. But Leo, every day, I want you to carve out time in your schedule, and I want you to get to know your people. I want you to know who they are. I want you to know about their families, and I want you to know about their whys. And it's not going to happen instantly, because they might not trust you, and that's okay. But the more time and intentionality that you spend getting to know your people and allowing them to get to know you, it's this concept of be the most interested person in the room, not the most interesting person in the room. And when you show that you're interested in people, they will respond and realize that you actually care. And that will change the dynamic of how you create a level of accountability within your organization.
Powerful stuff, Jason. And for our listeners, I highly recommend looking up the great work Jason is doing. To learn more, it's jasonoharris.com, JASONOHARRIS. And from there, I know people could also find out your social media links. And there's a lot of downloadables there as well for people if they're interested in looking into getting some of Jason's great work through keynotes and workshops. It's all on the website too. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I personally got a lot out of this conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, brother.
What's so interesting about listening back to that conversation is right now I'm preparing a keynote that I'm going to be giving on raising standards and holding people accountable. And so much of what Jason shared, I agree with. It's in my keynote, and it's just crazy how there are so many like-minded leaders like Jason who understand what it takes. Obviously, we all have fresh perspectives. And I'm going to, of course, do as I do, which is share what I believe are 3 insights and 3 actionable takeaways from our conversation. So the first insight, leadership is not a popularity contest. It's a trap I think a lot of leaders fall into. Myself, I fell into this quite a bit, which is wanting to be liked. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to lead. And at times, There are going to be people that no matter what you do, they don't like authority. They just won't like it. And if you're choosing to be in a position of leadership, then you have to make that choice to lead and make that a priority over being liked. Second insight, micromanagement is usually a training failure in disguise. If someone is falling into a pattern of micromanaging, it's because there is a knowledge gap. There is something that hasn't yet been taught. I think too often what people do is they will give someone a PowerPoint slide or an old video and say, okay, that's how you learn. And it's not enough. You're setting them up to fail because then you have to micromanage to ensure they do it right. Third insight, connection is the foundation of accountability. Connection leads to commitment. Commitment leads to accountability. Accountability leads to trust. In that order. That's how Jason described it. And you can't hold people accountable if you've never really taken the time to know who they are, why they're there. So I think there's value in taking time to build that connection with every person of whom is looking to you as a leader. Actionable takeaways. First of three. One, ask these two questions before holding anyone accountable. First question, can you unequivocally say you've given this person the right training and validated that they understand the job? Number two, can you unequivocally say you've given them the right processes and checklists to execute? If there's a no in either one of those, then you're not even ready to start holding them accountable. The training conversation needs to happen first. Second actionable takeaway, slow down to speed up. If you're ever saying, I don't have time to train someone, that's the signal that you need to slow down. That's exactly what is required. Fast is slow, slow is fast. You have to create time to train people. Otherwise, you're always going to be that person who's putting out fires, that jumpy superhero that's always running around trying to save the day. Third actionable takeaway, get to know your people with intention. Schedule time where you get to really know about who they are, their family, their why, what makes them tick. Don't try and do this all at once. This is going to take time. It's a gradual process to really build that relationship, but be intentional about this. And I think what Jason said was really powerful. He said, be the most interested person in the room, not the most interesting. Curiosity opens people up. Join us on Friday's episode. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I put together a keynote that I'm going to be sharing soon. And in it, I have a framework that just so funny how much it aligns with Jason's take on accountability. It's incredible. And I'm going to share my framework along with real life examples so that it could help you to be the kind of leader that can hold others accountable without needing to be harsh or cruel or inhuman. So if you're someone who wants to be better at holding others accountable, to be able to build that kind of trust and that kind of respect with others so that they're more bought in to what you're influencing them to do or what you're inviting them to do, then Friday's episode will be perfect for you. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. I'm rooting for you.